The horse's breath misted in the cold morning air as Tobias O'Sullivan led the mare through the muddy street toward the fighting pit, his calloused hands trembling despite his best efforts to steady them. He had raised this horse from a foal, trained her with patience and care, and she was worth more than everything else he owned combined. But the sound echoing from that blood-soaked arena had haunted him for 3 days now, and he could not let it continue. The town of Greymark sat on the eastern frontier, where the human settlements gave way to contested lands and old hatreds ran deep as mountain roots. Tobias had come here 6 months ago after the war ended, hoping to find work as a farrier and maybe save enough to start a small farm. What he had found instead was a place where cruelty was entertainment and suffering was profitable. The fighting pit had opened 2 weeks after his arrival. The crowd gathered every third day to watch prisoners and slaves battle for their lives, and the newest attraction was an orc woman who fought with such ferocity that she had already killed 4 opponents. The townsfolk called her the Green Death and placed bets on how long each challenger would last. Tobias had made the mistake of watching once. He told himself he needed to understand the place he had settled in, to know what kind of people surrounded him. But what he saw in that pit changed something fundamental in his chest. The orc woman was young, perhaps barely into adulthood by orc standards, and though she fought with desperate strength, he saw the terror in her eyes between each bout. She killed because she had no choice. She survived because the alternative was death, and 3 nights ago he had heard her singing. He had been working late in the smithy, hammering out horseshoes by lamplight when the sound drifted through his window. It was a song in the orc language, low and mournful, and though he could not understand the words, he understood the grief. She was singing a funeral dirge, for herself perhaps, or for those she had killed, or for a life she would never have. Now he stood outside the pitmaster's quarters, his horse's reins wrapped around his fist, and knocked on the weathered door. The pitmaster was a heavy-set man named Garvin who smelled of sour wine and old sweat. He opened the door with annoyance written across his ruddy face, but his expression shifted to curiosity when he saw the fine chestnut mare behind Tobias. "I want to buy the orc," Tobias said before his courage could fail him. Garvin laughed, a wet wheezing sound. "She is not for sale, blacksmith. She brings in too much coin. I will trade you my horse for her. This mare is worth 40 gold sovereigns at minimum. She is young, healthy, and trained for riding or cart work." The pitmaster's eyes narrowed with calculation. He walked around the horse, examining her legs and teeth, running his hands along her flanks. Tobias felt his heart hammering against his ribs. "She is a fine animal," Garvin admitted, "but the orc will earn me far more over time." "The orc will die," Tobias said flatly. "Maybe in the next fight, maybe in the one after. No fighter lasts forever in your pit. You know this. Take the guaranteed value now." Garvin stroked his stubbled chin. The morning sun climbed higher, and somewhere inside the building, Tobias heard the rattle of chains. 50 sovereigns, the pitmaster countered. "The horse plus 10 gold. I do not have 10 gold. The horse is all I have. Then we have no deal." Tobias felt desperation claw at his throat. He had sold his father's sword for the tools to set up his smithy. He had traded his mother's silver ring for his first month's rent. He had nothing left except the clothes on his back and the small room above the forge. "I will give you the horse and 3 months of free smithing work," Tobias offered. "Any work you need, horseshoes, weapons sharpened, repairs, anything. Plus the mare." Garvin's eyes gleamed. He had been complaining about the cost of the armory smith for weeks. 6 months of work, and you shoe all my horses, not just the personal ones. Tobias did the calculation in his head. 6 months of free labor plus the horse meant he would be working for nothing but his room and whatever scraps of paid work he could fit around Garvin's demands. He would have no savings, no cushion against disaster. If he became injured or sick, he would starve. "Done," he said. They shook on it, and Garvin produced a stained contract that Tobias signed without reading. His hand moved across the paper as though someone else controlled it, and he wondered distantly if he had lost his mind. "Wait here," Garvin said, and disappeared into the building. Tobias stood in the muddy yard, watching his horse, his beautiful clever mare, swish her tail in the cold. He had named her Dancer because of the way she high-stepped through streams. She nuzzled his shoulder and he pressed his forehead against her warm neck, breathing in the familiar scent of hay and horse. "I am sorry," he whispered. "You deserve better than this." The door opened again, and Garvin emerged, dragging a chain. At the other end of the chain was the orc woman. She was taller than Tobias by half a head, with broad shoulders and arms corded with lean muscle. Her skin was a deep forest green, darker across her shoulders and lighter on her palms. 2 small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her black hair was matted with dirt and blood. She wore only a ragged tunic that barely covered her thighs, and her feet were bare despite the cold. But it was her eyes that struck him silent. They were a warm amber color, like honey held up to sunlight, and they burned with such fierce intelligence and rage that he took an involuntary step backward. "She is yours now," Garvin said, shoving the chain into Tobias's hand. "Do not bring her back if she tries to kill you. That is your problem now." The pitmaster took Dancer's reins and led her toward his stable. The horse looked back once, and Tobias felt his throat tighten, but he did not call out. The deal was done. He stood alone with the orc woman in the muddy yard. She stared at him with those burning eyes, her jaw clenched, chains rattling at her wrists and ankles. "You speak the common tongue?" Tobias asked quietly. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, in a voice rough from disuse, she answered, "Yes. What is your name?" Her eyes flickered with surprise, as though she had not expected the question. "Why do you care, human?" "Because I would like to know what to call you." She studied him with open suspicion, her gaze moving from his worn boots to his simple leather vest to his face. Whatever she saw there did not seem to reassure her. "Kreshka," she said finally. "My name is Kreshka. I am Tobias. I have a room above the smithy on the east side of town. It is not much, but it is warm and dry. Will you come with me? Do I have a choice?" He looked down at the chain in his hand. Slowly, deliberately, he set it on the ground. "Yes," he said, "you have a choice." Kreshka stared at the dropped chain as though it were a serpent. Her hands curled into fists, and he saw the muscles in her legs tense. She could run, she could fight. She could kill him right here in this yard, and he would not be able to stop her. Instead, she asked, "Why? Why what? Why did you buy me? What do you want from me?" Tobias met her eyes and told her the truth. "I heard you singing 3 nights ago. I could not let it continue." Something shifted in her expression, too quick to name. She bent and picked up the chain herself, holding it loosely in one hand. "I will come," she said. "But if you try to use me like the pit master did, I will kill you. I do not care what happens to me afterward." "I will not," Tobias promised. "I swear it on my mother's grave." They walked through the town together, and Tobias felt every eye turn to watch them. He heard the whispers start immediately, spreading like fire through dry grass. The blacksmith bought the orc. He traded his horse for the monster. He must be mad. He must have vile intentions. Tobias kept his eyes forward and his stride steady. Kreshka walked beside him, her bare feet silent on the cold ground, the chain coiled in her hand like a weapon. His room above the smithy was reached by an outside staircase. It consisted of a single chamber with a narrow bed, a table, 2 chairs, a wood stove, and a trunk for his belongings. A window looked out over the stable yard behind the forge. Kreshka stood in the doorway, clearly unwilling to enter a confined space with him. Tobias did not push. He went to his trunk and pulled out a heavy blanket, his spare shirt, and a pair of wool socks. "These are for you," he said, setting them on the table. "The shirt will be too small, but it is better than what you have. I will get proper clothes made as soon as I can." She looked at the items as though they might vanish. "Why are you doing this?" "Because you are cold and you need them." "That is not an answer." Tobias sat down heavily in one of the chairs. Exhaustion was catching up with him, the weight of what he had just done settling onto his shoulders. "I was a soldier in the war," he said quietly. "I fought orcs on the northern border for 3 years. I killed 17 of your people in battle, maybe more. I stopped counting after a while." Kreshka's hand tightened on the door frame, but she did not speak. "When the war ended, I thought I would feel relieved," Tobias continued. "But instead, I just felt hollow. All that death, and for what? The borders are in the same place they were before. The land is still contested. Nothing changed except that thousands of people are dead." He looked up at her, this orc woman who had every reason to hate him, to want him dead. "I cannot undo what I did in the war," he said. "But when I heard you singing that dirge, I knew I could not stand by and do nothing this time. So I am doing this. I am doing what I can." Kreshka was silent for a long time. Finally, she stepped into the room and picked up the blanket. She wrapped it around her shoulders and some of the tension eased from her frame. "You are a fool," she said. "This will not absolve you, I know. And I still do not trust you. I would not expect you to." She moved to the far corner of the room and sat down with her back against the wall, the blanket pulled tight around her. From that position, she could watch both him and the door. Tobias stood slowly, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. "I need to go down to the forge and start working. Garvin will be sending his horses soon, and I have other commissions to finish. There is bread and cheese in the trunk if you are hungry. The door does not lock from the outside. You can leave whenever you want." He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it is worth, Kreshka, I am glad you are alive." He did not wait for a response. He descended the stairs and entered the smithy and tried to focus on the familiar rhythm of hammer and anvil. The morning passed in a blur of heat and metal. Tobias worked on 3 horseshoes for a farmer's plow horse, repaired a broken axe head, and straightened a bent fire poker. His mind kept drifting upward to the room above, wondering if Kreshka was still there or if she had fled into the countryside. Around midday, he heard footsteps on the stairs. He looked up to see her standing in the smithy doorway, still wrapped in the blanket, watching him work. "There is a well in the yard," he said without stopping his hammering. "Fresh water. I have a bucket and ladle in the corner there." She found the bucket and went outside. He heard the creak of the well rope and the splash of water. When she returned, she had washed the worst of the blood and grime from her face and hands. The transformation was startling. She looked younger, less like a hardened killer and more like what she probably was. A girl barely into womanhood, exhausted and traumatized. She sat on a stool near the door, watching him work. Tobias found her scrutiny unnerving but said nothing. If observing him made her feel safer, then she could observe. "How old are you?" she asked abruptly. 26 summers. "You, 19, he nodded, keeping his attention on the horseshoe he was shaping. "How did you end up in Garvin's pit?" Her silence stretched so long that he thought she would not answer. Then, quietly, "Raiders attacked my clan's settlement 8 months ago. They killed the warriors and elders. They took the young ones to sell. I was bought and sold 3 times before I ended up here." Tobias felt anger kindle in his chest, hot and fierce. "I am sorry." "Your sorrow changes nothing." "No, but it is all I have to offer." She pulled the blanket tighter. "Why do you work for Garvin now? You said you traded 6 months of labor." "Yes. You have enslaved yourself to free me." "That makes no sense." Tobias set down his hammer and met her eyes. "It makes perfect sense. You did not choose to be in that pit. I chose to make this deal. There is a difference. Is there? You will suffer because of me. I will work hard because of my choice. That is not the same as suffering." Kreshka shook her head slowly. "Humans are strange. So I have been told." A ghost of something that might have been a smile crossed her face, there and gone in an instant. The afternoon brought customers, and Tobias saw their reactions when they noticed Kreshka sitting in the shadows. Some left immediately. Others stayed but kept their distance, eyeing her as though she might attack at any moment. One farmer spat on the ground near her feet and told Tobias he was a disgrace to his species. Tobias finished the man's work, took his payment, and told him to find another smith in the future. As the sun began to set, Garvin's stable hand arrived with 3 horses that needed shoeing. Tobias worked quickly, aware that Kreshka had gone tense and still, her eyes fixed on the stable hand like a predator watching prey. When the man left, she released a long breath. "That one was there," she said softly. "At the pit. He would throw stones at fighters who did not perform well." Tobias felt his jaw clench. "Did he throw stones at you?" "Once. I caught one and threw it back, broke his nose." This time Tobias did smile, sharp and brief. "Good." As darkness fell, Tobias banked the forge fire and locked up the smithy. He climbed the stairs to find Kreshka standing by the window, looking out at the stars. "I do not know what the sleeping arrangements should be," he admitted. "The bed is small. I can sleep on the floor if you want the bed, or I can sleep in the smithy and you can have the room." She turned from the window. In the lamplight, her green skin seemed to glow softly. "We are both adults. We can share the space without incident. I will take the floor by the door. That is the coldest part of the room. I have slept in worse places." Tobias pulled a second blanket from his trunk and handed it to her. "At least use this." She took it without argument and made herself a nest in the corner. Tobias pulled off his boots and lay down on the bed fully clothed, acutely aware of her presence just a few feet away. "Tobias," she said into the darkness. "Yes, thank you, for what you did today." His throat tightened. "You are welcome." He lay awake for a long time, listening to her breathing gradually slow and deepen as she fell asleep. The magnitude of what he had done settled over him like a weight. He had traded his future for her freedom, and he had no idea what would come next. But when he finally slept, his dreams were peaceful for the first time in months. The next days fell into an uneasy routine. Tobias worked in the forge from dawn until dusk, fulfilling his obligations to Garvin and taking what paying work he could find. Kreshka remained in the room or the smithy, never venturing far into town. She watched him work, helped organize his tools, and gradually began to speak more freely. He learned that she had been a hunter in her clan, trained in tracking and archery. She told him about the northern forests where her people lived, about the long winters and the communal fires where stories were shared. She spoke of her mother, who had been a healer, and her younger brother, who she hoped had escaped the raiders. In return, Tobias told her about growing up on a small farm, about losing his parents to fever when he was 16, about the desperate choice to join the army because it offered steady pay and food. He told her about his best friend Marcus, who had died in the final battle of the war, and how he still sometimes forgot Marcus was gone and turned to share a joke with him. "Grief is like that," Kreshka said quietly. "It sneaks up on you when you least expect it." "Yes, exactly like that." On the 4th day, Tobias came upstairs to find Kreshka attempting to mend his spare shirt, which had torn at the shoulder. She was using a needle and thread she must have found in his trunk, but her large fingers struggled with the delicate work. "Here," he said gently, sitting beside her. "Let me show you a trick my mother taught me." He demonstrated how to knot the thread and make small, even stitches. His hand brushed against hers, and he felt the warmth of her skin, the calluses on her palms. She tensed at the contact but did not pull away. "Like this?" she asked, attempting a stitch. "Perfect. You are a fast learner." She concentrated on the work, her brow furrowed. "My mother tried to teach me sewing. I was always too impatient. I wanted to be in the forest with my bow." "Do you miss it? Hunting?" "Every day I miss the quiet of the trees. The way the light filters through the leaves. The satisfaction of a clean kill that will feed your people." She paused in her stitching. "I miss feeling useful." An idea sparked in Tobias's mind. "What if you could hunt again?" She looked at him sharply. "What do you mean?" "There are woods to the east of town. Game is plentiful. If you could bring in fresh meat, I could sell it at the market. It would help offset the cost of feeding both of us, and you would be doing something you love." "I have no bow." "I could make you one, and arrows. I am decent with woodwork." Kreshka set down the sewing, her expression uncertain. "You would trust me with a weapon?" "Yes. I could run away. I could disappear into those woods and never return." Tobias met her eyes steadily. "I know, but you could have run away any time in the past 4 days, and you have not. So yes, I trust you." Something shifted in her face, a wall crumbling. "You are either the bravest man I have ever met or the most foolish. Probably both." She laughed then, a real laugh, rough and surprised, and the sound filled the small room with warmth. Over the next week, Tobias spent his evenings crafting a bow. He selected seasoned ash wood from his supply, carved it carefully, and strung it with waxed cord. The arrows were more challenging, but he shaped them with patience, fletching them with goose feathers purchased from the market. When he presented the finished bow to Kreshka, she took it with reverent hands. She tested the draw, adjusted her grip, and nodded with satisfaction. "This is good work," she said. "Better than good. This is a hunter's bow. I had a good teacher in mind when I made it." She looked at him with those amber eyes, and he saw something new there. Not quite trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. The first morning she went hunting, Tobias found himself anxious. He worked in the forge but jumped at every sound, wondering if she would return. She had taken the bow and arrows before dawn, slipping out silently, and he had no idea when she would come back, if she came back. But as the sun reached its zenith, he heard her footsteps on the stairs. She appeared in the smithy doorway with 2 rabbits and a pheasant hanging from her belt, her face flushed with exertion and something that looked like joy. "The woods here are rich," she said. "I could have taken more, but I did not want to be greedy." Tobias felt relief flood through him. "This is excellent. I will take them to the market this afternoon." She cleaned the game with practiced efficiency, and he watched her work, marveling at the skill in her hands. She noticed his attention and paused. "What?" she asked. "Nothing. You look happy." Her expression softened. "I am. For the first time since the raiders came, I feel like myself again." He sold the game at the market for a good price, and when he returned, he divided the coins between them. Kreshka stared at her share. "Why are you giving this to me? You earned it. This is your money." "But I live in your room, eat your food. And you provide meat that I sell. This is fair compensation." She closed her fingers around the coins, and he saw her blink rapidly, as though fighting tears. "No one has paid me for my work since I was captured. No one has treated me like a person." Tobias reached out slowly, giving her time to move away, and squeezed her shoulder gently. "You are a person, Kreshka. You deserve to be treated like one." She looked up at him, and for a moment he thought she might embrace him. Instead, she nodded and tucked the coins into her pocket. The hunting became a pattern. Kreshka would leave before dawn and return by midday with game. Tobias would sell it at the market, and they would split the profits. Between that income and his smithing work, they began to build a small savings. But not everyone in town was pleased with the arrangement. Tobias was working late one evening when he heard shouting outside. He emerged from the smithy to find a group of 5 men in the yard, and Kreshka standing on the stairs with her bow in hand. An arrow knocked but not drawn. "We do not want your kind here, orc," one of the men snarled. He was young, probably no more than 20, with the build of a farmhand. "You should be dead in that pit where you belong." "Then you should have fought me yourself instead of sending others to die," Kreshka replied calmly. The young man's face reddened. "You think you are clever, you are a monster, a killer." "So are you," she said, gesturing to the sword at his hip. "I see the notches on your blade, 12 of them. Did you count my people as you killed them, or did they not matter enough to tally?" Tobias stepped forward, positioning himself between Kreshka and the men. "That is enough. All of you need to leave, now." "You are a traitor, O'Sullivan," another man spat. "You traded your horse for that creature. You let her live under your roof. It is unnatural. What I do with my property and my life is none of your concern. Get off my land." The young farmhand reached for his sword, and Tobias heard the creak of Kreshka's bowstring as she drew back the arrow. "I would not," she said softly. "I can put an arrow through your eye before that blade clears its sheath." The man froze. His companions shifted nervously. Tobias kept his voice level. "Go home. Sleep off whatever has made you think this was a good idea. If you come back here looking for trouble, you will find it, and you will not like the outcome." For a tense moment, no one moved. Then the farmhand spat on the ground and turned away. His friends followed, muttering curses and threats. When they were gone, Kreshka lowered her bow and released the tension on the string. Her hands were shaking slightly. "Are you all right?" Tobias asked. "I have faced worse. But thank you for standing with me." "Always," he said and meant it. That night, as they lay in the darkness of the room, Kreshka spoke quietly. "This cannot continue, Tobias. The town hates me. Your business will suffer. Your reputation is already damaged." "I do not care about my reputation." "You should. You have to live here after I am gone." He sat up in bed. "What do you mean, after you are gone?" She was quiet for a moment. "I have been saving my money. In another month I will have enough to buy supplies and travel north. I can try to find what remains of my clan or start over somewhere else." The thought of her leaving felt like a physical blow. Somewhere over the past few weeks, her presence had become essential to him. The sound of her footsteps on the stairs, the sight of her cleaning game in the yard, the low rumble of her laugh when he said something unintentionally funny, these things had woven themselves into the fabric of his days. "What if you stayed?" he asked. "Here, in this town that despises me. We could leave together, go somewhere new, find a place on the frontier where people care more about hard work than old prejudices." "Why would you do that? This is your home, your business." Tobias lay back down, staring at the ceiling. "This was never meant to be permanent. I came here because it was far from the battlefields, but it is not home. Home is. Home is where you feel safe, where you belong. And you do not feel that here." "No, but I feel it when I am with you." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Kreshka did not respond, and Tobias cursed himself for saying too much, for revealing the feelings that had been growing in his chest like a wild garden. But then he heard her move, the rustle of blankets as she stood. She crossed the small room and sat on the edge of his bed. "I feel it too," she said quietly, "and it terrifies me." He reached for her hand in the darkness, and she let him take it. Her fingers were warm and strong, calloused from bowstring and blade. "Why does it terrify you?" he asked. "Because I have lost everything already. My family, my clan, my freedom. If I let myself care for you, if I let myself hope for something good, and then I lose that too, I do not think I could survive it. Tobias sat up, still holding her hand. I cannot promise that nothing bad will ever happen. Life does not work that way. But I can promise that whatever comes, we face it together, if you will have me. She turned to look at him, and even in the darkness he could see the shimmer of tears in her eyes. You are a good man, Tobias O'Sullivan, better than I deserve. That is not true. You do not know the things I have done, the people I have killed. You do not know the things I have done either. We are both soldiers, Kreshka. We both have blood on our hands, but that does not mean we cannot choose something different now. She was silent for a long moment. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a gesture of intimacy and trust. Then let us choose something different, she whispered. They stayed like that for a long time, breathing in sync, finding comfort in each other's presence. Eventually, Kreshka returned to her corner, but something fundamental had shifted between them. The next morning, Tobias woke to find Kreshka already gone, out on her dawn hunt. He went through his morning routine and was opening the smithy when he heard a horse approaching at speed. Garvin rode into the yard on Dancer, the pit master's face flushed with anger. "O'Sullivan," he bellowed. "Where is the orc?" Tobias felt ice settle in his stomach. "Why do you want to know?" "Because she killed 3 men last night, you fool. They were found this morning with arrows in them." "What? No, that is impossible. She was here all night." "You would lie for that monster." "I am not lying. She did not leave this room from sunset to sunrise. I would have heard her." Garvin dismounted, his hand on his sword. "The arrows match the ones you made for her." "I have seen them at the market." Tobias's mind raced. Anyone could have copied the design, and even if they are her arrows, that does not mean she fired them. Someone could have stolen them. A convenient excuse. It is the truth. "She has not left my property except to hunt, and she always returns with the arrow she takes. I can show you her quiver right now. Full count." Garvin hesitated, uncertainty crossing his face. "Who were these men?" Tobias pressed. "The ones who were killed, farmhands. They were drinking at the tavern last night, talking about teaching the orc a lesson." Cold understanding washed over Tobias. "They came here last night, 5 of them. They threatened Kreshka and we sent them away, but they were all alive when they left." "So you admit she threatened them?" "She defended herself when they threatened her first. If they are dead now, it was not by her hand." Garvin stared at him, clearly wrestling with whether to believe him. Finally, he said, "The town wants justice. They want the orc punished. The town wants a scapegoat. They have already decided she is guilty because she is an orc." "Can you prove she did not do it? Can anyone prove she did?" "Real proof, not just assumptions and prejudice." Garvin's jaw worked. He was a greedy man, but not an entirely unreasonable one. "Keep her here. Do not let her out of your sight. I will investigate properly. But if I find evidence she is responsible, I will take her back, and our deal is void." "Agreed. But you will find she is innocent." The pit master remounted and rode away, and Tobias stood in the yard, his heart pounding. When Kreshka returned an hour later with a deer across her shoulders, he told her everything. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger. "They are trying to frame me. Someone killed those men and made it look like my work. That is what I think too, but who and why to get rid of me? To drive me out of town or see me hanged." She set down the deer and began pacing. "I should leave now, before this gets worse. No, running makes you look guilty. Staying might get me killed, or you killed for harboring me." Tobias caught her arm gently. "We will figure this out, together. Remember," she looked at him with desperate eyes, "I do not want you to suffer for me. Too late. I already traded my horse. Remember, we are in this together." Despite the situation, she managed a weak smile. "You are impossible, so I have been told." They spent the day trying to piece together what had happened. Tobias went into town and asked careful questions. He learned that the 3 dead men were part of the group of 5 who had confronted Kreshka. The other 2 had alibi witnesses. They had been seen drinking at the tavern until well past midnight. The bodies had been found in an alley behind the general store, each killed with a single arrow to the chest. The arrows were crude but effective, and while they resembled Tobias's work, they lacked the distinctive fletchings he used. He reported his findings to Garvin, who seemed grudgingly impressed by Tobias's detective work. So someone is trying to implicate the orc, the pitmaster mused. But who benefits? Someone who wants her gone. Maybe someone who lost money when I bought her from you. Garvin's eyes narrowed. There were several people who were angry about that. Let me ask around. 2 days later, Garvin returned with news. It was Jenkins, the tavern keeper's son. He had placed a large bet on the orc dying in her next fight. When you bought her, he lost a significant sum. He thought if he killed some men who had threatened her and made it look like her work, she would be executed and he would have his revenge. How did you find out? He bragged about it while drunk. Several people heard him. Garvin shook his head. He has been arrested. You and the orc are cleared. Relief flooded through Tobias. Thank you for investigating properly. Thank you for insisting on it. I do not like being made a fool of, and Jenkins played me. He paused. Your orc is a better person than half the humans in this town. Take care of her. After Garvin left, Tobias climbed the stairs to find Kreshka standing at the window, her shoulders tense. It is over, he said. They caught the real killer. You are cleared. She turned, and he saw tears streaming down her face. I thought for certain I would die for this. I thought this was how it would end. He crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. She stiffened for a moment, then melted against him, her body shaking with silent sobs. He held her tightly, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring reassurances. You are safe, he whispered. I will not let anything happen to you. She pulled back enough to look at him, her amber eyes swimming with tears. Why do you care so much? Because you matter. Because you are kind and brave and strong, and you deserve to be protected. That is not all of it, she said, searching his face. Is it? He took a breath, knowing he was about to cross a line from which there was no return. No, that is not all of it. I care because I have fallen in love with you, Kreshka. Somewhere between hearing you sing in the pit and watching you laugh in my smithy, I fell completely and irrevocably in love with you. Her breath caught. Tobias, you do not have to say anything. I know this is complicated. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this cannot work, but I needed you to know. She cupped his face in her hands, her touch gentle despite her strength. You foolish, wonderful man, do you not see? I love you too. I have tried not to. I have told myself it is impossible, that we are too different, that the world will never accept us, but I cannot stop how I feel. He kissed her then, and she kissed him back, fierce and desperate and full of hope. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. What do we do now? She asked. We leave. Like we talked about, we find somewhere we can build a life together. You would truly give up everything for me. I already did, remember? I traded my horse. He smiled. Besides, everything I need is right here. She laughed through her tears and kissed him again. They spent the next week preparing. Tobias fulfilled his remaining obligations to Garvin, working long hours to complete all the promised smithing work. Kreshka hunted and sold the game, adding to their savings. They bought supplies for the road, blankets, cooking gear, dried food, and a sturdy pack mule. On their last night in Greymark, they lay together in the small bed, wrapped in each other's arms. Where will we go? Kreshka asked. North and west. I heard of settlements in the mountain valleys where humans and orcs trade peacefully, where they care more about survival than old hatreds. It sounds like a dream. Then let us make it real. In the morning, they loaded the mule and walked out of town together. A few people watched them go, some with relief, some with contempt, and a few with what might have been understanding. Garvin met them at the edge of town. To Tobias's surprise, he was leading dancer. "Here," the pit master said gruffly, handing over the reins. "Our deal is complete and you did good work. She is yours again." Tobias stared at his horse, emotions welling up. "Garvin, I thank you. Just do not come back. This town does not deserve you," he nodded to Kreshka. "Either of you." They continued on, now with a horse and a mule, heading into the wilderness. The road was rough and the weather turned cold, but they had each other. 3 weeks of travel brought them to a valley nestled between two mountains. A small settlement sat beside a clear river, perhaps 40 buildings in all, surrounded by farmland and pastures. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Tobias could see both humans and orcs working in the fields. They approached cautiously, but the response was far different from what they had experienced in Greymark. A human woman greeted them warmly and directed them to the settlement's elder, an old orc man named Garthok. Garthok listened to their story with shrewd eyes. When they finished, he nodded slowly. "We have no use for prejudice here," he said. "Survival requires cooperation. If you are willing to work hard and contribute to the community, you are welcome. Human and orc, together or separate, it makes no difference to us." Tobias felt Kreshka's hand squeeze his. "We would like to stay," he said. "Good. There is a plot of land on the eastern edge that has been vacant. It has a small cabin, needs work. If you can farm or smith, you will do well here." They accepted immediately. The cabin was indeed rough, one room, a leaking roof and a broken stove. But it was theirs. They spent the rest of autumn repairing and improving it. Tobias built a smithy beside the cabin, and Kreshka planted a winter garden. The community welcomed them, and they made friends among both the human and orc families. As winter set in, they settled into their new life. Tobias took commissions from the settlement and nearby farms, building a reputation for quality work. Kreshka hunted and traded pelts, her skills highly valued. In the evenings they would sit by their fire, telling stories and making plans for the future. One night, as snow fell softly outside, Tobias took Kreshka's hand. "I have something for you," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring he had forged himself, simple iron, polished to a shine, with her name etched inside. "Kreshka, I know that orc marriage customs are different from human ones. But in my tradition, this ring is a symbol of commitment, of choosing to build a life together. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife in whatever way feels right to both of us?" She took the ring with trembling hands. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "In my tradition," she said, "we pledge ourselves before our clan and the ancestors. But my clan is gone, and we are far from the ancestral lands." She slipped the ring onto her finger. "So let us make our own tradition. Yes, Tobias, I will marry you. I will be your wife, and you will be my husband, and we will build something new together." They married a week later in a ceremony that blended human and orc customs. Garthok officiated, and the entire settlement attended. Kreshka wore a dress that the human women had helped her make, green as spring leaves. Tobias wore his best clothes and the sword that had been his father's. They exchanged vows in both languages, promising love, loyalty, and partnership. They shared bread and salt, symbols of prosperity and flavor in life. And when Garthok pronounced them married, the settlement erupted in cheers. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and more food than Tobias had seen in months. He danced with his wife under the stars, holding her close, marveling at how far they had both come. "Are you happy?" he asked her. "Happier than I ever thought possible," she said. You saved my life, Tobias, in every way a person can be saved. You saved mine too. You gave me purpose. You gave me hope." She kissed him soft and sweet, and he tasted the salt of her happy tears. That winter was hard with deep snows and bitter cold, but they weathered it together. In the spring, Kreshka discovered she was pregnant. The news filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. What if the child is not accepted? She worried. What if they are caught between two worlds belonging to neither? Tobias placed his hand on her still flat belly. "Then we will teach them to make their own world, like we did." Their daughter was born in early autumn as the leaves turned gold and red. She had her mother's green skin, softened to a pale sage tone, and her father's blue eyes. Tiny tusks were barely visible when she yawned. She was perfect. They named her Mira, which meant peace in the old Orcish tongue. The settlement gathered to welcome her, humans and orcs alike bringing gifts and blessings. Garthok held the baby with surprising gentleness and declared her a bridge between peoples, a symbol of hope for the future. As Tobias watched his wife nurse their daughter by the firelight, he thought back to that cold morning when he had traded his horse for a terrified orc girl in chains. He had not known then what he was choosing. He had only known that he could not stand by and do nothing. That choice had led him here, to this cabin in the mountains, to this woman he loved more than life itself, to this child who represented everything good they could build together. Kreshka looked up and caught him watching. "What are you thinking about?" "About how I would do it again. All of it. Every hardship, every sacrifice. It was worth it to get here." She reached out her free hand and he took it, marveling at how their fingers fit together so perfectly. "I still cannot believe it sometimes," she said, "that you traded your only horse to pull me from that pit. That you looked at me and saw someone worth saving. I looked at you and saw someone extraordinary. I was right." Their daughter made a small sound and they both smiled. Outside, the wind whispered through the pine trees, carrying the scent of wood smoke and coming winter. But inside their cabin, there was warmth and light and love. The years that followed were not without challenges. They faced harsh winters and difficult harvests, illness and injury, and the occasional prejudice from outsiders who passed through the settlement. But they faced everything together, their bond growing stronger with each trial. Mira grew into a bright, energetic child who loved both her parents' stories, orc tales of the northern forests and human tales of farms and adventures. She learned to work leather from her mother and metal from her father. The other children in the settlement, both human and orc, accepted her completely, and she grew up not knowing the hatred that had defined her parents' early lives. When Mira was 3, Kreshka gave birth to a son they named Thuron. He had his father's light skin with a greenish undertone and his mother's amber eyes. Like his sister, he was healthy and happy, growing up in a home filled with love. Tobias's smithy prospered, and Kreshka became known as the best hunter in the region. They built a larger house to accommodate their growing family, with separate bedrooms for the children and a large kitchen where they gathered for meals. On warm evenings, they would sit on the porch they had built together, watching their children play in the yard while the sun set behind the mountains. Kreshka would lean against Tobias's shoulder, and he would wrap his arm around her, and they would talk about everything and nothing. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked one such evening. "Leaving your old life behind?" "Never," he said firmly. "That was not a life, it was just existing. This is living." "You were always a romantic," she teased. "You married me anyway. Best decision I ever made." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair, pine and wood smoke, and something uniquely her. Mira ran up to the porch, her face flushed with excitement. "Papa, Mama, come see. Thuron caught a frog." They both rose, laughing, and followed their daughter to where their son crouched by the stream, proudly showing off a small green frog sitting in his cupped hands. "Very good, little one," Kreshka said, "but we should let him go back to his home now." Thuron carefully released the frog, watching it hop away into the grass. As the stars began to appear, they called the children inside for supper. The table was crowded and noisy, filled with laughter and the simple joy of being together. After the children were in bed, Tobias and Kreshka returned to the porch. The night was clear and cool, perfect for stargazing. "Tell me about the future," Kreshka said. "What do you see for us?" Tobias considered. "I see us growing old together in this house. I see our children growing up strong and kind, free from the prejudices we faced. I see us welcoming grandchildren someday. I see a life built on the foundation we have made: love, hard work, and the courage to choose hope over fear." "That sounds perfect. What do you see?" She was quiet for a moment. "I see the same, but I also see something else. I see our story inspiring others. I see more mixed couples settling here, more families like ours. I see this settlement growing into a true haven where species does not matter, only character." "We are already starting to see that," Tobias noted. 3 mixed couples have settled here in the past year alone. "Because we proved it could work. Because we showed that love is stronger than hate." He pulled her closer. "We did we not, against all odds? Because of you," she said. "Because you were willing to trade everything for a stranger in a pit. Because I heard you singing and could not turn away." She tilted her face up to kiss him. "I love you, Tobias O'Sullivan, more than words can express. I love you too, Kreshka O'Sullivan, until the stars go dark." They sat together under those stars. 2 people from different worlds who had found each other in the darkness and built something bright. Their story would be told for generations in the settlement: the human who traded his horse for an orc, and the love that grew from that single act of courage and compassion. But in that moment, they were simply a husband and wife, grateful for the life they had built and the future that stretched before them, full of promise and possibility. The settlement continued to thrive, becoming known throughout the region as a place of harmony between species. Travelers would sometimes arrive, refugees from places where prejudice still reigned, and they would find welcome and acceptance. Each new family added to the community's strength and diversity. Tobias and Kreshka became respected elders in their own right, though they were still relatively young. People sought their advice on everything from conflict resolution to farming techniques. They taught by example, showing that mutual respect and love could bridge any divide. As their children grew into teenagers, Mira showed an aptitude for diplomacy and often accompanied Garthok on trips to negotiate with neighboring settlements. Thuron, meanwhile, discovered a talent for healing and studied under the settlement's physician, learning both human and orc medicinal practices. One evening, when Mira was 16 and Thuron 13, the family gathered for dinner as usual. The children were telling stories about their day when Mira suddenly grew serious. "Papa, Mama, I need to tell you something," she said. Tobias and Kreshka exchanged glances, recognizing the tone. "What is it, daughter?" Kreshka asked. "There is a boy. His name is Petran. He is human from the northern farm. I care for him, very much." Tobias felt his chest tighten with a mixture of pride and protective instinct, but he kept his voice calm. "Does he care for you?" "Yes, but his father is not happy about it. He says mixed couples cause problems." Kreshka reached across the table to take her daughter's hand. "Your father and I faced the same objections. What matters is what you and Petran want and whether you are willing to face difficulties together." "I am, we are, but I wanted you to know, and I suppose I wanted your blessing." Tobias looked at his daughter, this brave, beautiful young woman who had never known the fear and hatred he and Kreshka had endured. She was everything they had hoped the next generation would be. "You have our blessing," he said. "Always. We trust your judgment and we will support whatever choice you make." Mira's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. But," Kreshka added with a slight smile, "we want to meet this boy properly. Invite him to dinner." Over the following weeks, they got to know Petran, an earnest young man who clearly adored Mira. His father remained opposed, but the young couple's determination reminded Tobias so much of his own journey with Kreshka that he could not help but support them. The seasons turned, and life continued its rhythm. There were weddings and births, illnesses and deaths, good harvests and lean years. Through it all, Tobias and Kreshka remained the steady heart of their family and their community. On their 20th wedding anniversary, the settlement threw a celebration in their honor. Tables were set up in the common square, laden with food and drink. Music played, and people danced under lanterns strung between the buildings. Garthok, now quite elderly but still sharp-minded, stood to make a toast. 20 years ago, a human man and an orc woman came to our settlement, he said, his voice carrying across the square. They had nothing but each other and the courage to hope for something better. Today, they have a family, a thriving business, and the respect of everyone who knows them. But more than that, they changed us. They showed us what is possible when we choose love over fear, acceptance over prejudice. To Tobias and Kreshka O'Sullivan. The crowd erupted in cheers and raised their cups. Tobias stood, pulling Kreshka up with him. "Thank you, all of you. When we arrived here, we were running from a world that could not accept us, but you welcomed us and let us build a home. You gave our children a place to grow up free from hatred. For that, we will be eternally grateful," Kreshka added, "and we hope that our story encourages others to be brave, to choose love even when the world says it is impossible. Because it is not impossible, it is just difficult, and anything worth having is worth fighting for." More cheers, and then the music started again. Tobias led Kreshka into a dance, and their children joined them, and then their friends, until the square was filled with swirling bodies and laughter. As they danced, Tobias looked at his wife, older now, with fine lines around her eyes and a few silver threads in her black hair, but still beautiful, still strong, still the person who had captured his heart in a smithy all those years ago. "What are you thinking?" she asked, noting his gaze. "That I would do it all again, every moment, every sacrifice, to get here to this exact moment." "So would I," she said, "though I still cannot quite believe that you traded your only horse for me. Best trade I ever made." She laughed, that same rough, wonderful laugh he had fallen in love with. "You are impossible. And you love me for it. I do, more than you will ever know." They danced until the stars wheeled overhead and the lanterns burned low. Around them, their community celebrated not just their anniversary, but what they represented: the possibility of change, of growth, of building something better than what came before. Later, as they walked home under the moonlight, their children ahead of them talking and laughing, Tobias thought about that morning so long ago when he had knocked on Garvin's door. He had not known what he was doing, had not understood the full consequences of his choice. He had simply known that he could not stand by and do nothing. That one choice had led to everything good in his life. It had led to Kreshka, to their children, to this community, to a life richer and more meaningful than he could have imagined. "What are you thinking about now?" Kreshka asked, squeezing his hand. "About how one choice can change everything. The choice to save a stranger, the choice to hope, to believe that things can be better, to act on that belief even when it seems foolish." She stopped walking and turned to face him, her amber eyes reflecting the moonlight. You gave me my life back, Tobias. You gave me hope when I had none. You gave me love when I thought I would never know it. Everything I am, everything I have, I owe to your courage that morning. And you gave me purpose, he replied. You gave me a reason to be better, to do better. You showed me what real strength looks like. We saved each other, Kreshka. They stood there in the moonlight, two people who had found each other in the darkness and built a life together. Behind them, the settlement slept peacefully. Ahead, their children waited at the door of their home, the home they had made with their own hands. Come on, Mira called. Are you going to stand out there all night? Tobias and Kreshka laughed and walked forward together, hand in hand, toward their children and their home and their future. Inside, they gathered around the fireplace for a final cup of tea before bed. The children talked about the party, about their friends, about their plans for the coming days. Tobias and Kreshka listened, occasionally adding comments but mostly just soaking in the warmth of being surrounded by family. When the children finally went to bed, Tobias and Kreshka remained by the fire. 20 years, Kreshka mused. It has gone so fast, and we have many more ahead of us. I hope so. I want to see our children married, to meet our grandchildren, to grow old with you. We will, Tobias promised. We have come too far to stop now. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you think we have made a difference? Beyond just our own family. Look around you, love. This settlement exists because people like us proved it could work. Those 3 mixed couples who settled here. They came because of us. The children who play together without caring about species. That is because of what we have built. We have made a difference. Every single day we make a difference. Sometimes I wish we could go back and tell our younger selves that it would all work out, that the fear and the pain would lead to this. Would you want to? The struggle made us who we are. She considered this. No, I suppose not. But I would like to tell that girl in the fighting pit that she would survive, that she would find love and family and peace, that she would be happy. She knows, Tobias said gently. She is you, and you know it now. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn down to embers. Outside, an owl called, and the wind whispered through the trees. The world continued its ancient rhythms, and they were part of it, woven into the fabric of this place they had made their own. Finally, they banked the fire and went to bed. As they lay together in the darkness, wrapped in each other's arms, Tobias felt a profound sense of contentment. His life had not been easy, and the future would undoubtedly bring new challenges, but he faced it all with courage because he did not face it alone. I love you, Kreshka murmured, already half asleep. I love you too, he whispered back, and in the morning they would wake up and begin another day, another chapter in their ongoing story. They would work and laugh and face whatever challenges came their way. They would watch their children grow and their community thrive. They would grow old together, their love deepening with each passing year, but all of that was tomorrow. Tonight, they simply held each other close and slept peacefully. 2 souls who had found their home in each other's arms, bound together by a love that had been forged in the fires of adversity, and tempered by courage, compassion, and hope. The story of the human who traded his horse to save an orc from the fighting pit had become legend in the region, told and retold around fires and dinner tables. But for Tobias and Kreshka, it was simply the beginning of their life together, the first page in a book they were still writing, day by day, choice by choice, love by love. And they lived happily, surrounded by family and community, proving every day that love could bridge any divide, that courage could change the world, and that one person's choice to act with compassion could ripple outward in ways they could never fully imagine, touching lives and transforming futures for generations to come. Their story was not just about rescue or romance. though it was both of those things. It was about the power of seeing another person truly seeing them, recognizing their humanity or orcity or simply their personhood, and choosing to act on that recognition. It was about building bridges instead of walls, about choosing hope over despair, about the everyday courage required to love across boundaries that society insisted should not be crossed. And in the end, it was about home, not as a place but as a feeling, as the peace that comes from being truly known and truly loved, from building something lasting with someone who sees you completely and chooses you anyway, every single day, in 1,000 small ways and a few monumental ones. That was what Tobias had given Kreshka when he traded his horse, and what Kreshka had given him in return when she chose to stay, to trust, to love. They had given each other home, and from that foundation they had built a life worth living, a family worth cherishing, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone. As the years rolled on, and their hair turned silver and their children had children of their own, Tobias and Kreshka remained the heart of their community, living proof that love could conquer hate, that different peoples could not just coexist but thrive together, and that sometimes the best trades are the ones that seem foolish to everyone except the two people involved. And every night as they lay down to sleep, Tobias would remember that morning when he had led his horse to the fighting pit, and he would smile, knowing that he had made the right choice, the only choice, the choice that had led him to everything that mattered. And Kreshka would remember the moment when he had dropped her chains and given her a choice, and she would reach for his hand in the darkness, grateful beyond words for the human who had seen her not as a monster or a commodity, but as a person worthy of freedom, respect, and love. Their love story was not perfect, but it was real, and it was theirs, and that was more than enough.